Question 12. Which of the following arguments is most similar in its reasoning to the argument above? So, this is a long one, and now that we're hitting question 12, we're hitting the point of the test where things might actually start getting pretty rough. And this is not a parallel with the flawed argument, so it would be forgiven to be a little more trepidatious about this one. But you should certainly at least give it a try and see if you can narrow down through process elimination what are good guesses quickly. And then decide whether to press on or put a question mark next to it and come back to it if you have time. So what do we have? Well, this sounds fairly real world. Suppose I have promised to keep a confidence, i.e. not going to tell someone a secret. Someone has told me that they have a Christmas present for someone else, but it's a surprise, okay? And someone asked me a question that I cannot answer truthfully without thereby breaking the promise, like, what did Bob get me for Christmas? Sure. Obviously, I cannot both keep and break the same promise. Okay, you didn't really need to tell me that. Why even spell that out? That seems like either LSAC is playing head games with us, or they're afraid we're going to attack them in a very nitpicky way. Anyway, therefore, one cannot be obliged both to answer all questions truthfully and to keep all promises. Sure, doesn't mean I have to lie, doesn't mean I have to say, oh, Bob got you a dartboard, when in fact he got the person an aquarium tank, or whatever. It just means that I have to say, I'm sorry, I promise not to tell you that. Of course, Bob could promise you to keep secret the fact that he promised you to keep something secret, in which case maybe you're screwed. But I think that goes outside the scope of what this argument's getting at, so we won't worry about it. Point is, this argument is both sane and valid, right? This seems to correspond to what can happen in the real world perfectly reasonably, and premises adding up or not, everything logically adds up. You, given those premises, you cannot be obliged to do both these things. So any answer choice, the sort of first way we'll zoom in on the bullseye here, the ones that are not even in the white ring, will be ones that are invalid, that just have flaws in them, don't add up. And also let's notice that this argument is pretty binary, right? That I've promised to do this. There's truth and false. Obviously, I cannot keep and break the same promises being spelled out for some reason. So we should certainly, if we're taking an educated guess, we would certainly be looking for something that's sort of hard-edged in a similar way. Hard-edged, yet valid and possibly sane. Although, of course, the premises of the parallel argument do not necessarily need to correspond in reasonableness. Anyway. All right, so let's look at these. A, it's claimed we have the unencumbered right to say whatever we want. Okay, so that sets up thing A. It is also claimed we have the obligation to be civil to others. Okay, so we have the right to say things, but we should respect others. I kind of see where this is going, but civility requires that we not always say what we want. True, and that is an obligation. An obligation is sort of a strong word. Of course, these are just claims, whatever. So it cannot be true. So this is sort of following the same one cannot be obliged both to logic of the original. It cannot be true both that we have the unencumbered right to say whatever we want and that we have the duty to be civil. Well, I'm liking A already. In the original argument, we have, if you make a promise, then you can't tell the truth. And then if someone asks you a question, you would have to tell the truth if you were the sort of person who had to answer all questions truthfully. So you cannot be the sort of person who has to answer all questions truthfully if you're the sort of person who keeps your promises. And of course, again, in the real world, the solution to that is to say, how about those Mets? So anyway, in A, we have the same sort of paradox set up. You can't do both these things at once because they contradict each other. And this all seems pretty hard-edged, and not going to give it the full circle yet. Let's see what else is there, but certainly I like it. Circle meaning a four-sided quadrilateral where all the sides are of equal length. B. Some politicians could attain popularity with voters only by making extravagant promises. Okay, I already don't like this. I'm not fond of that some. I'm not fond of that only. I feel like this is not as hard-edged, and the only is saying up an only if sort of statement that I suppose you could read if then into the original, as I sort of did up there, but it has a different vibe. Let's keep going. This, however, would deceive the people. Okay. So, since the only way for some politicians to be popular is to deceive, and any politician needs to be popular, I feel like we have just more premises and more moving parts here. It follows that some politicians must deceive, and I also feel like this conclusion is not coming to a sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, or, you're in a pickle sort of conclusion as just, it follows that some politicians must deceive is a, sad fact about the universe. So I am going to cross out B and not think about it anymore. Now, C, D, and E, on the other hand. Okay, we'll come back to A. Ignore that. Oh, that's perfect. If we put a lot of effort into making this report look good, okay, so here's an if-then statement. I don't know. The client might think, not crazy about that might, we did so because we believed our proposal would not stand on its own merits. Okay, so if we make it all shiny, they might think that we're trying to jazz them, I believe is the term the kids use. Maybe it's zazz them. I'll have to look that up. On the other hand, if we do not try to make the report look good, the client might think we are not serious about our business. Right, so you don't want to be too shiny, you don't want to be slovenly. And what is the conclusion? So whatever we do, we risk her criticism. Now, I could see someone keeping this. It has the same damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of vibe. I would say where it breaks down is that it's the easiest way to knock down is probably whatever we do, we risk her criticism. And again, the mights are all very probabilistic. Note that the argument up top is really just sort of a logical cul-de-sac. You cannot be obliged to do X and do Y at the same time. Not whether we do X or Y, things might turn out bad. So I could see keeping it on maybe first glance, but ultimately, no. Okay, D. Let's see if we can knock it out before I have to read the last line. If creditors have legitimate claims against the business, and the business has the resources to pay those debts, then the business is obliged to pay them. That seems like a reasonable claim, sure. I suppose that's sort of like defining promising to keep a confidence being about a secret or something. It's a little convoluted, but fine, you're making some obligation claim. Also, if a business has obligations to pay debts, then a court will force it to pay them. Okay. Now, what already seems a little askew about this is that I feel like there's a chain going on here, right? If creditors have claims and business has resources, then you've got this obligation. And if you've got the obligation, then you are forced to pay. This is already sort of getting chain-like in a way that the original argument does not seem. Okay, but the court